Helen Keller said, "The marvelous richness of human experience would lose something of rewarding joy if there were not limitations to overcome. The hilltop hour would not be half so wonderful if there were no dark valleys to traverse." Several years ago, I was dating a woman. She invited me to meet her family, and the occasion was Thanksgiving of all times. No pressure there. In my capacity as minister, I often find myself in a setting where I am asked to lead a prayer, to invoke a blessing, or to give thanks. I find it difficult to respond in the way that I would truly like. So I find myself either giving the group what I know they are asking for, a prayer to God in Jesus' name, or squeezing out some watered-down version of a Unitarian Universalist prayer to the Spirit of life and love, or the God of creation, or some such thing. This woman's family knew I was a minister, and the inevitable happened. Taken by surprise, I decided it was best to offer an honest glimpse of myself, and I did the latter, a Unitarian Universalist prayer. I never saw her family again. I am thankful in so many ways for life and its blessings, but I do not give thanks to the Christian God. I do not believe in that being as he is presented or understood. I do not believe in original sin. I do not believe in the total depravity of people or the need for a salvation epic. I do not believe in the death penalty or the patriotism of war. I believe in what Jesus taught and what he did. I believe in turning the other cheek. I believe in the impermanence of possessions and the preeminence of love. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Straight from the lips of Jesus. Christopher Reeve said, "Countless people have remarked to me, your faith must be a great help as you cope with your ordeal. Then they ask me, what is your religion?" That used to put me in an awkward position, he said, because I could tell they wanted to hear that I am a deeply religious person. The truth is that I only found a religion very recently that I can reconcile with a lifelong quest for the meaning of spirituality. He said he very much enjoyed studying Eastern religions such as Taoism and Buddhism. I liked the idea that all living things are sacred and that there are gods in trees, the flowers, the earth, water, and sky. But he said the religious studies in school drove me away from organized religion. We learned that religion started wars, that the great crusades were conquests in the name of Christ, that New World settlers took it as their mission to convert the savages while stealing their land. And the religion that he finally found in his search for spirituality, Unitarian Universalism. Christopher Reeve is most well known to the modern era for his role as Superman. But he also starred or appeared in 18 motion pictures, 15 television shows, 4 Broadway plays, 2 off-Broadway plays, and after his accident, he directed one HBO movie for which he received an Emmy nomination, and the show received 4 Emmy nominations. Christopher was a sailor from the age of 7, played piano from the age of 8, studied as a graduate school at Juilliard, flew airplanes for more than 20 years, including 2 solo trips across the Atlantic. He enjoyed scuba, skiing, and tennis. He was trained in competitive horseback riding, and he raced sailplanes. He is the author of 2 books, one of them, Still Me, from which today's story is taken, and the other, Nothing is Impossible. On Memorial Day, May 27, 1995, Reeve was competing in an equestrian competition in Culpeper, Virginia. On the 3rd jump, his horse stopped suddenly, sending Reeve over the top, where he landed head first, squarely on the top rail of the short jump. He broke his 1st and 2nd vertebrae. In the opening chapter of Still Me, Reeve begins with the following story. Until I read it, I had never thought much about what a person with a serious physical handicap might dream about. I had thought about the tragedy of immobility, the daily struggle to accomplish what comes easily for most of us, the things we take for granted. But I never thought about the other side of midnight. Here is what he wrote. A few months after the accident, I had an idea for a short film about a quadriplegic who lives in a dream. During the day, laying in his hospital bed, he can't move, of course. But at night, he dreams that he's whole again and is able to do anything and go everywhere. This is someone who had been a lifelong sailor and who had always loved the water, and he had a beautiful gaff-rigged sloop. In his dream, he sails down the path of a full moon, and there's a gentle breeze, perfect conditions, the kind of romantic night sailing that anyone can imagine. But by 7 in the morning, he's back in his bed in the rehab hospital, and everything is frozen again. The dream is very vivid, and as time passes, it becomes even more vivid. At first, it's just a dream, and he recognizes it as such. But suddenly one night, he finds himself actually getting out of bed and leaving the hospital, fully aware of walking down the corridor and out the door, then into the boat, which magically is anchored not far away. And he gets on board and goes sailing, long into the night and the moonlight. Soon, these voyages become so real to him that when he wakes up in his bed at 7 in the morning, his hair is soaked. And the nurse comes in and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't dry your hair enough last night when I gave you a shampoo. You slept with wet hair." He says nothing, but he's thinking that his hair is wet from the spray when he was out on the water. One time he comes back still wearing his foul weather gear, and he has to hide it in the hospital room closet. Now, his wife and family, his wife and children have been very distressed all along because since he became paralyzed, he has not been able to pull out of a serious depression. He has shut them out of his life. His children are afraid of him because he is not himself and they don't know how to be with him. And his wife has been talking to the doctors and the psychologists about what to do because he apparently unable to cope or come out of his shell. But as he continues to go sailing in his dreams, and as these dreams become more and more real, his mood begins to improve, and he seems less withdrawn. In the mornings, he is more content and much more communicative. His wife notices the change, but she can't understand it, and he won't explain it. It's not something that he can talk about. He thinks that he may be losing his mind. But since the family is feeling the benefit of his improvement, his dreams are making their life together happier. He sails in Tennant's Harbor, an idyllic spot in Maine. And there's a fellow there, an older man, who always turns on the light in his cabin down by the water when our man is sailing. He doesn't sleep very well, and he always gets up to watch the younger man go out in the wooden boat. Sometimes he comes down to his dock, and we can tell from the yearning in his eyes that this is something he loves and admires. Not that he's jealous, but he never misses a chance to see that beautiful boat sailing so beautifully in the moonlight. Well, there comes a time when our protagonist realizes that these voyages offer a way of escaping from his paralyzed condition, that he could just sail on and on happily. It's what he loves most in the world. Until one night he would go out in the middle of the ocean and he wouldn't take supplies or anything. He would just sail until he dropped, and he would die happy. He would just go sailing down the path of the moon as far as he possibly could go and leave everything and everyone behind. And one night he starts to do that. He just decides he's going to go with no idea where. He is going to sail away forever. But then as he is heading out to sea, he starts to think about what he has in his life. How grateful he is for his wife and his children. Because during the days, you see, he's changed. His kids are less afraid of him, and they're playing with him. And his wife, they're clearly in love. He is coming out of his depression. So here he is, doing the thing he loves most for himself, thinking that he could sail on and forget the world. But along the way, he begins to realize what he is leaving. He turns the boat around and comes back. And he goes straight to the dock of the older man who has always loved this boat. He ties up right at the dock, and when the old man comes down to greet him, our man says, "Here, this is for you." He gives up the boat. He no longer needs it. And he goes back to the hospital, and he wakes up, and he's frozen, and he's a quadriplegic again. But he has an entirely new basis for the future with his family. I read this story, and I thought immediately about Thanksgiving, about getting in touch with what I am thankful for, about getting in touch with gratitude for every day that I am alive. Christopher defined it this way. When a catastrophe happens, it's easy to feel so sorry for yourself that you can't even see anybody around you. But the way out is through your relationships. The way out of that misery or obsession is to focus more on what your little boy needs, or what your teenagers need, or what other people around you need. It's very hard to do, and often you have to force yourself. But that is the answer to the dilemma of being frozen. At least it's the answer I found. Now I know on a visceral level how fragile our existence is.